Dicen que hay peligro cuando salgo.
Cindy.
Que no
Courtney.
le temo a lo
You're so
malo.
sensitive.
A veces soy candela. No te confundas que no soy nada de
I want you to tell him
buena.
how awful you've been to me.
En mis ojos ves maldad. No soy ni mala ni santa. Tráeme alcohol para que se moje la garganta. Una como yo a ti te hace falta. Calladita pero a veces soy mala. Empiezo y no quiero parar. No soy ni mala ni santa. Tráeme alcohol para que se moje la garganta. Una como yo a ti te hace falta. Calladita pero a veces soy mala. Empiezo y no quiero parar. No soy ni mala ni santa.
Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. This video is my review for the 8th episode of Stargirl titled Shiv Part 2. Obviously from the title you can tell this was the second part of Cindy's story, but this didn't really feel like a two-parter. We didn't get that much of Cindy and Shiny Knight didn't appear. Also, Stargirl has been renewed for a season 2, but it will be leaving DC Universe and will now have its permanent home at the CW. So rest in peace DC Universe, but people have many complaints and I think some parts of this episode show there won't be that much of a change, but I'll mention that when I get to them. The plot of this episode was that following last episode, Courtney was injured from her fight with Shiv, and her teammates wanted revenge, so they made a plan to sneak into Cindy's house. Meanwhile, Pat was trying to find out who Shiv's father was, and Barbara was on her trip with Icicle, who had to go visit a friend. Last episode ended with an epic fight between Shiv and Stargirl, where Shiv beat Courtney until she was saved by Shining Knight. Then Pat came and found her unconscious. This episode started with Pat driving away pretty quickly. At first I thought he was being stupid and irresponsible because I assumed he was driving Courtney to the hospital, and I thought that it was out of character for him to put her in more danger like that. Obviously I was wrong. My guess was that he was being chased by Solomon Grundy after that, but that wasn't it, and that also shows that Grundy barely shows up, and when he does, it's at night and we can barely see him, so being on CW wouldn't have that much of an effect on that. Anyway, it turned out Pat crashed his car so that he could use it as a cover story for what happened to Courtney, and that made me think Pat was a genius. This was an amazing idea, and I liked how he actually had some sort of proof. It wasn't like when they both said they fell off the stairs. But I felt bad that Pat had to wreck his car. He called Barbara to tell her what happened and interrupted her dinner with Icicle. Back to that later. Then Courtney woke up at the hospital where Pat told her everything and what he had told Barbara. Now here and later when he explains it to Barbara, I was disappointed with the explanation because I think it could have been a bit better. I thought he should have said that Courtney took the car by herself because she thought she was ready to drive even though she barely had experience and she didn't listen to Pat. This would have been similar to what actually happened without having to tell the truth. An important thing that happened here was that Courtney promised Pat that she wouldn't go off by herself like that anymore. So it seemed that she was finally learning. As they were leaving the hospital, they passed by Brainwave's room and stopped to say hi to Henry. This was so weird, I was confused why they even did that. Courtney and Henry have never really talked, and she wrecked his car, although I don't think he knows that. I'm not sure if Henry read her mind, but he stood up and went to close the door, as he should, to Courtney's disappointment. Now let's move on to Cindy. Following last episode, Cindy believed she had beaten Stargirl and went back to her father's lair, thinking that this would get her a spot on the table, because like I guess last episode, she was going after Stargirl to get recognition from her father and the JSA, hoping they would accept her if she did what they couldn't. She was really proud of herself, however, her dad wasn't as excited. He knew that Courtney wasn't dead because her body was gone and thought that Cindy ruined the chance for them to capture Courtney since she was in the tunnels. He also mentioned that the Shiv outfit was her graduation suit, so now it makes sense why it was there. It was probably for once she joined the ISA, although now it seems like that won't happen since he kicked Cindy out and went back to work. The rest of the new JSA was furious when they found out what happened to Courtney and wanted to get revenge on Cindy. We saw a bit of how unstable Rick is. I think he might have anger issues and I hope they deal with that later on. Yolanda seemed to be going along with him, but Beth tried to calm them down and explained how she cares about all of them, which I believe from her, but I don't think the others really care about her. Once they calmed down, Beth proposed a plan. Using the goggles, they would go to Cindy's house and find out who her parents are. When Pat and Courtney got back from the hospital, Pat went to talk to the staff, so obviously he looked crazy because he's talking to a stick, and he even acknowledged that. But he also mentioned how Courtney is still young with no training, unlike Sylvester, who was already the Star-Spangled Kid, which I think is the first time they refer to him by that name and not Starman. The staff is driving Courtney off into this fight that she's not ready for, so he asked it not to listen to Courtney. It didn't seem like the staff listened at first, but then it signaled it did once Pat left. During this whole scene, I was worried Barbara would walk in and think he was talking about her and cause more drama between them, which has already been set up. Once Barbara got home, she had a talk with Pat about what happened, and once again, he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth as much as he wanted to because he promised Courtney he wouldn't. However, it seems that Barbara does have her suspicions that she's being lied to. Then we got what was actually a good scene with Mike again. He wasn't annoying this episode, he just walked in to apologize to Courtney because of what he said last episode. I thought maybe he felt that's what made Courtney get so distracted and caused her to crash. This was probably the best moment between them and the first time we've seen them bond as siblings. Later on in Courtney's room, Barbara walked in to tell her that one of her friends had come over, and as we saw in the promo, it was Cindy. I know she's happy Courtney's making friends and everything, but why does Barbara just let any random girl come in if they claim to be friends with her? Like with Beth before and now with Cindy. Anyway, Cindy didn't seem to know that Courtney was Stargirl and was actually apologizing for how she reacted at the game. Although Courtney still seemed suspicious of her and seemed a bit worried, I actually liked these moments between them and wish they could have become friends. It was just what Cindy needed, a true friend who wasn't being forced on her after Jenny had gotten mad at her, and someone that understood her. They talked and ate chocolates and actually seemed happy for a while, and I liked how Cindy pointed out the obvious similarities between them with their parents, although also with Pat and Dragon King and their staffs. Right before she was about to leave, however, she pointed out that she knew that Courtney was Stargirl. It should have been obvious, but it was kind of a twist because they were starting to convince me she didn't know. There's no way she shouldn't have known after Pat was literally out there yelling Courtney's name when she was right next to her. Also, I'm glad she pointed out how that stupid mask doesn't hide anything. Finally, a show that's realistic and doesn't pretend that putting on a pair of glasses will confuse people. I don't think they ever had to tell Bev, so she probably realized that after hearing Yolanda's name. And now that Cindy can see it too, they're both smarter than Lena Luthor, who spent the whole season mad because she couldn't figure out her so-called best friend was Supergirl. But Cindy also said she was going to go kill Courtney's friends while they just so happened to be at her house. Pat tracked down the new JSA who were hiding behind the bushes by Cindy's house, and he wanted to stop them, but Bev was already ringing the doorbell, so as the responsible father figure he is, Pat went after her. Bobby answered the door, and Bev lied to her that she was Cindy's friend who was here so Cindy could help her get on the cheerleading team. I love how she used the same excuse that she did with Barbara to get into Courtney's house. This scene was great and pretty funny, with Bev's awful cheerleading move and the goggles detecting Pat's weight, and how they lied that Pat was Bev's dad and messed up on saying he married her mom or that she was adopted. Bobby led them into the house, and they immediately started looking around for anything suspicious. For example, they had fake books, they noticed that Dad wasn't around, and it didn't really look like a family room. Bobby went to get cookies for them, and Beth asked for water so that she could put on the goggles, and when Bobby returned, they lied that she's pretty much blind, like her comic book counterpart. Also, the goggles were not able to detect who Bobby was, so this is more proof that she's a robot. She does seem to have feelings for Pat, so is she like a person that Dragon King recreated, like his minions, or did she used to have another life, or did he make her from scratch? Beth pretended she had to go to the bathroom to explore more of the house and ended up finding the door to the lair. I thought it was way too convenient, but I did enjoy seeing Beth explore the tunnels. Unfortunately, she lost connection to Yolanda, so it seems like the goggles work like a phone or computer and need service or Wi-Fi. That's pretty inconvenient for when they're fighting. I was worried something would happen to her in there that would leave her blind since they referenced it earlier, but instead she just heard Grundy and ran away from fear. She ended up going to Cindy's room, and I love how Cindy has a giant portrait of herself and then her room is full of pictures of herself. Meanwhile, Cindy had just gotten home and Yolanda and Rick had to warn Beth and made a plan to get her out of there, so Yolanda put on her suit, although once again it was strange how she put it on in public. Cindy walked by Bobby and Pat, who were fixing some pipes or something, and head up to her room. Before she left, Beth did find the black and white picture that I assumed was Dragon King as a human, and the goggles identified it as Dr. Ito, which is what Icicle called him before. Once again, we saw that he is extremely old. He was around during the war like Charles, and he's a war criminal. But he's supposed to be dead, so that's probably when he transformed into a lizard man. As Cindy was going to her room, Yolanda appeared and told Beth to jump out the window. She ended up falling into Rick's arms, and I think they might be setting them up to be together, but I'm not sure if I feel they have chemistry. Meanwhile, Pat was fixing the pipes and Bobby started flirting with him, which was creepy and weird, but I guess it makes sense because she's desperate and gets no attention from her husband. Of course, Pat was freaked out, and when he saw the kids running away, he also left. Once they were together, they told Pat about Ito, and he recognized him, so I'm confused if Pat is just as old as the other members of the JSA and ISA. They ended up leaving after this because they were out in the daylight while Yolanda was wearing her suit. But Courtney didn't know that they left because Yolanda left her undelivered, so she assumed they were still at Cindy's house. So she headed down to the basement, but the staff actually listened to Pat and wouldn't let Courtney take it. But once Courtney mentioned Pat and her friends were in danger, it went along with her to save them. Earlier in the episode, she had promised Pat that she wouldn't go out on her own and be reckless, but now she did it again. She learned nothing from her fight with Shiv, just like she learned nothing from Joey's stuff. although you could use the excuse that her friends were in danger. She ended up going to Cindy's house, where Cindy had noticed that her dad's picture was missing and was starting to look for it when Stargirl crashed through her window and attacked her. So we finally got the rematch between Stargirl and Shiv, but they ended up flying through the window into the street. We also followed Henry throughout this episode. For a while he has been developing his powers, but he wasn't exactly sure what was going on with him other than learning he could read minds. He was still having really bad headaches, so he was trying to open up a bottle of pills and ended up causing the pills to float. So not only is he a telepath, but he also has telekinesis. He used his powers to move a key into the right lock, where it opened the secret door to his father's lair. There we could see Brainwave's suit, a picture of his mom, and some tapes. He looked through some files and saw a letter where Dr. Ito told Brainwave that Cindy would be looking after his kids, so as we already knew, the whole relationship was forced on her. I thought the line about how she's good at watching things was cringy and weird. I also feel bad about everything that happened to Yolanda even more, because it was all Dr. Ito's fault since he forced Cindy to get her out of the way. Henry was shocked at the news and immediately fled over to Cindy's house. When he arrived, Cindy and Stargirl fell out of the window and fell right in front of his car. He went over to help Cindy get up, which is when Cindy yelled that she was going to kill that star-spangled bitch. So there's another thing that people thought would change from the CW, although it's not like they swear a lot on this show. After all, it's not Titans. Cindy and Stargirl continued their fight while Henry was reading both of their minds, with Cindy saying that they were just like their parents. Henry was overwhelmed with all this information and ended up doing something like a canary cry, where he threw both of them. Cindy stood up, and I thought we were gonna get another badass scene from her when she took out her blade, but Ito's minions showed up and dragged her down to the sewers. Now I'm worried that her dad's going to reprogram her and it'll erase her memories of Courtney being Stargirl. Then Henry went over to Courtney and was reading her thoughts, so he found out his dad was Brainwave, and he also realized that Courtney was Stargirl. I don't know if it was from the mask or from her thoughts, but Courtney is now doing a worse job at hiding her identity than Barry Allen, although at least Henry can join the Smarter Than Lena Luthor club. Henry ended up running away, but unfortunately Dr. Ito saw him on his computers, and now he knows that Cindy was wrong and he does have his dad's powers, which means he can use him instead of Brainwave for Project New America. There was also a smaller storyline going on with Icicle. As I said before, him and Barbara went out to dinner after their business trip, which is when Pat called her and worried her about Courtney. But Icicle also left saying that he had to go talk to a friend. It's really obvious he likes her, and there's so much chemistry between them. So this is another thing that I think wouldn't change from the move to CW, because that's already happening. There's already a love triangle. It might be one-sided, but they are setting up one between Pat, Icicle, and Barbara, and it also might be a love square if you throw in Bobby, although Pat doesn't really care for her. Icicle ended up going to a hotel room where he waited for the man that he claimed was his friend, who was in charge of the company that poisoned the water supply, which led to his wife's death. This was the first time we saw Jordan turn into Icicle, and that looked amazing as he transformed and killed that guy. Now, this is one part I am going to miss from the move to CW, the amazing CGI, because they're going to have a lower budget. It already looks like they don't have a high enough budget to use Stripe a lot, because he's always getting stuck somehow, and now it'll be even worse. Icicle mentioning the water pollution made me think of the water problem in Flint, Michigan, although that's a different thing, and when I tried to find it, I found another thing that's closer to what Icicle was describing, the Love Canal disaster, which happened in the 70s. Well, it might not be exactly this disaster, it does give more evidence that the ISA and JSA are much older than they say they are. We already knew Charles was around during the war. In this episode, we learned that so was Dr. Ito. In fact, he was a war criminal, and Pat recognized him. The part that ruins this for Icicle is that Cameron is much younger than he should be if they're from that time, unless he's also much older than he claims to be. It might be because the 100 is doing all that stuff with time dilation, but I think that they may be time displaced. Overall, this was a pretty good episode, although not as strong as last episode. It didn't feel like a two-parter, but we did get a lot of development, even if Courtney ended up backtracking at the end. I think I would give this episode an 8 out of 10. We did get another good fight scene, although not as good as the last one, and Henry finally joined the main storyline. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for similar content. Leave your thoughts in the comments and have a good day. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.